A man who once broke her heart shows up during a stormy night. A little girl reveals a shocking truth, and long-buried secrets come crashing back. Will they find a way to forgive and become a family again? Watch to the end to see how it all unfolds. Dear friend, what you're about to experience is not just a story. It's a deeply human journey about loss, resilience, and the quiet, unexpected ways love finds us when we need it most. If this is your first time here, I invite you to drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing your voice. And if you're someone who believes in second chances and the hidden strength of ordinary people, and in stories that stay with you long after they end, consider subscribing and tapping the bell icon. We share moments that matter. Thank you for being part of this one. Now let's begin. Have you ever felt so empty inside that you found yourself driving through the night past every mile marker of your past just to escape the noise in your head? Nathaniel Quinn had everything his name on the covers of culinary magazines, a penthouse in downtown Chicago, and a line of best-selling cookbooks that made him a millionaire before he turned 40. But on a rain-slicked evening in early autumn, none of it could fill the void spreading in his chest. That night, he didn't care where he was going. He just needed to get away from his own life. The further he drove, the narrower the roads became, winding through forests lined with towering maples, their leaves already burning with orange and red. His luxury SUV's headlights cut through the fog until he reached a desolate stretch near Asheville, North Carolina. That's when it happened. A sudden thud under the hood, a hiss of steam, and his engine died. The rain started to fall harder. He was alone in the dark. The only sign of civilization, a crooked wooden sign swaying in the storm, Whispering Pines Book Café. He nearly laughed at the sight. A book cafe in the middle of nowhere. But the wind howled around him like a warning, and he stepped inside. The door creaked open, revealing a room that smelled of old paper cinnamon and something faintly floral. The place looked forgotten, a jumble of overstuffed chairs, sagging shelves, and faded rugs. Lightning flashed outside, briefly illuminating the cracked plaster walls and the handwritten menus pinned to a corkboard. He called out twice, but only the echo of his own voice answered. Then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, sitting on a stool behind the counter wearing an apron so big it nearly swallowed her. Her hair was dark and tangled, her cheeks rosy from the cold, and her eyes wide with a seriousness far beyond her years. She was reading a storybook by the light of a small camping lantern. When she noticed him, she closed the book carefully as though it were the most precious thing in the world and looked up. "Do you want cocoa or tea, mister?" she asked, her voice soft but clear, as if serving strangers in the dark was the most natural thing. Nathaniel's breath caught in his throat. He had faced the most ruthless critics in the world's finest kitchens, but nothing prepared him for the sight of a child alone in a rundown cafe in the middle of a stormy night. He swallowed hard, trying to find his words. "Is your mom here?" he managed. The little girl nodded, almost imperceptibly. "She's cooking in the back. She doesn't like to come out when she's sad." Her words hit him like a hammer. The world outside the cafe seemed to slip away, the storm fading to a muffled roar beyond the fogged windows. He glanced around again, seeing details he'd missed at first: the chipped mugs, the worn teddy bear tucked behind the counter, the board with IOUs written in careful handwriting. This wasn't just a cafe. It was someone's desperate attempt to hold a life together. He sat down heavily in one of the mismatched chairs near the window, his hands trembling more from the weight of the moment than the chill in the air. He loosened his tie, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked here in his tailored suit, his expensive watch glinting under the weak lantern light. The little girl poured him a cup of tea with a precision that broke his heart. She reached up on her tiptoes to set the cup in front of him. "What's your name?" he asked softly. Ellie, she replied with a shy smile. What's yours? He hesitated. For the first time in years, the name Nathaniel Quinn felt like a stranger's. Nate, he said finally. Just Nate. The cafe was silent except for the ticking of an ancient clock and the occasional rumble of thunder. Nate found himself studying Ellie's face, and something about her felt hauntingly familiar. Her eyes, the shape of her nose. There was a memory buried deep inside him, a face he'd tried to forget. A wave of realization began to rise, but he pushed it back. It was impossible. As the storm grew fiercer, the power flickered once, twice, then died completely. Ellie calmly retrieved another lantern from behind the counter, lighting it with the confidence of someone who had done it 100 times before. Nate watched her with a mix of admiration and sorrow. No child should have to know how to survive nights like this. In that quiet, candlelit room, Nate thought of all the times he'd been praised for his precision, his drive, his relentless ambition. Yet here none of it mattered. The only thing that felt real was the small girl who looked up at him like he was both a stranger and something more. His heart ached with a heaviness he couldn't name. A lesson began to form in his mind, as simple and profound as the silence surrounding them. Success means nothing if it leaves you alone in the dark. The world will measure you by what you build, but the only thing that truly matters is who you build it with. As the lantern's glow bathed the room in a soft golden light, Nate heard a door creak somewhere behind the kitchen. He straightened, his pulse quickening. The shadows seemed to deepen the air, thick with questions yet to be answered. He knew deep down that what came next would change everything. And so begins the unraveling of secrets long buried as the past he thought he escaped comes walking out of the darkness. Rebecca had once believed that love could fix anything. She was 27 when she first met Nathaniel Quinn, and his ambition burned so brightly it lit up every corner of her quiet life. She fell for him the way a tree leans into sunlight fully instinctively, without realizing how fragile it all was. Back then, she was finishing her master's in English literature in New York, working evenings at a cozy book cafe that smelled of vanilla and old pages. He'd stop by after his shifts at a rising star restaurant, hair still damp from the kitchen, heat eyes alive with dreams. They'd sit for hours in the corner booth planning futures so big they scared them both. They talked about opening their own cafe together someday, a place where stories and food came together, where people could find comfort in a cup of cocoa and a well-worn book. For Rebecca, it was more than a dream. It was the promise of a life that mattered, a life built side by side with someone who saw her heart. But as Nathaniel's star rose, his nights grew longer, his visits shorter. Awards and television segments pulled him away. She told herself it was temporary, that love would win if she just waited a little longer. Then came the night he called, his voice shaking with excitement about an opportunity in Chicago, his own cooking show, investors lining up a chance to become the face of modern cuisine. She congratulated him, heart swelling with pride and cracking with fear all at once. That night, he never said "we" in their future plans, only "I." 2 weeks later, he left. Rebecca tried to hold on, but calls went unanswered. Messages came back undeliverable. It was as if he'd stepped into another world, one where she didn't exist. She found herself alone in a tiny apartment with unpaid bills and morning sickness that wouldn't let her forget him, even for a day. When she finally accepted he wasn't coming back, she packed up what little she owned and took a bus south. She picked Asheville almost at random, drawn by a flyer, promising cheap rentals, and the promise of a town with kind strangers. She found an attic apartment above an abandoned cafe. Each night she sat cross-legged on the warped wooden floor, sketching plans to reopen the cafe herself. It was all she had left, their old dream, but without him. Her days blurred into a series of jobs, waiting tables at diners, shelving books at the library, cleaning houses. Anything to buy diapers and formula to keep the electricity on. She sold the engagement ring Nathaniel had given her under the fairy lights in Washington Square Park, a ring she'd worn like armor. The money bought paint a coffee machine, a used cash register. And slowly, room by room, she brought the cafe back to life. When Ellie was born, Rebecca held her tiny daughter in trembling arms and promised her two things: that she would never let her feel unloved, and that she would fight every day to give her a safe place in the world. Nights were the hardest. When Ellie wouldn't sleep, Rebecca sang the lullaby Nathaniel used to hum absent-mindedly while stirring a pot, a simple tune from his childhood. She'd rock Ellie in the creaky old armchair by the window, staring at the moonlight slipping across the floor, wondering if he ever thought of her, of them. But the hardest part wasn't the poverty, the exhaustion, or even the loneliness. It was the constant question in Ellie's eyes as she got older. "Where's my daddy?" Rebecca never lied. She told Ellie there was a man she once loved very much who had to leave to follow his dreams. She left out the nights she cried herself to sleep, the letters she never sent, the phone calls she rehearsed but never made. She left out the way her heart still twisted when she thought of him. The cafe became more than a livelihood. It was her anchor, her shield against despair. Locals came to know Whispering Pines, book Café as a place of warmth. Regulars like Mr. Franklin, a retired jazz musician who taught Ellie to whistle, made it feel like a family. On slow afternoons, Rebecca read stories aloud to Ellie, surrounded by mismatched chairs and shelves filled with second-hand novels. The two of them built a world inside those walls, one where love wasn't defined by what was missing, but by what they gave each other every day. Yet, even as she poured her soul into the cafe, Rebecca couldn't shake the fear that someday Ellie would look at her with resentment for growing up fatherless. That maybe the love of a mother would never be enough to fill the hollow left by an absent father. She would lie awake, listening to Ellie's soft breathing, whispering prayers into the dark, for strength, for patience, for the impossible wish that the man she once knew might one day walk through the cafe door. And every time she opened the cafe in the morning, she wondered if today would be the day he'd appear as impossible as it seemed. She'd imagine him silhouetted in the doorway, the years falling away as he called her name. But days turned into years, and she learned to stop hoping. The silence between them stretched so long it became part of the air she breathed. In those quiet hours before dawn, when she prepared muffins and wiped down the tables, Rebecca carried the weight of memories that still felt unfinished. And though she tried to bury them under the daily rituals of survival, they pulsed just beneath the surface of every smile, every bedtime story, every cup of coffee she handed across the counter. She knew the past wasn't gone, it was simply waiting. But life has a way of forcing us to face what we've tried hardest to forget. And as Rebecca moved through the familiar motions of her day, she had no idea that the storm outside was carrying someone back into her world, someone who would change everything she thought she knew about love, forgiveness, and the family she had fought so hard to protect. The storm outside raged harder than before, sheets of rain slamming against the cafe's windows in waves that rattled the old glass. Inside, Nathaniel sat hunched over his untouched tea, the lamplight flickering across his face. Every time he looked at Ellie, he felt a tightening in his chest. He couldn't explain. Her eyes reflected the same shade of green as someone he once loved, the same spark of curiosity he remembered from quiet nights spent sharing dreams in New York. Ellie's soft voice cut through his swirling thoughts. "You know Mommy's song," she said, suddenly looking up at him with eyes wide and searching. Nathaniel froze. His mind spun as he realized he had been humming that lullaby again, the same tune he'd sung to Rebecca years ago, without even thinking. His eyes darted to the swinging door of the kitchen as it creaked open the storm's wind, tugging at the edges of the room. And there she was. Rebecca stepped out framed by the door like a ghost from another life. Her face pale but fierce, her eyes locked on his, as though seeing an apparition. The silence that fell was so deep it swallowed the storm's roar outside. Ellie looked from one to the other, confusion blooming on her small face. Nate, Rebecca, whispered the name, falling from her lips like a word she had carried in her heart too long. He stood, almost knocking over his chair, his hand reaching out halfway before dropping to his side. "Rebecca," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of years of unsaid words. "I didn't know. I never thought." His sentence dissolved into nothing. Rebecca's eyes glistened, but her voice was sharp. "What are you doing here, Nate?" The question held so many layers, it nearly broke him. Was he here to apologize, to claim something he abandoned, or just to ease his own guilt? He took a shaky breath. "I don't know. My car broke down. I walked in and I saw her. I heard the song. I knew." He looked down at Ellie, tears welling in his eyes. Is she mine?" Rebecca clenched her jaw, every muscle in her body taut. "What do you think she said?" Her voice barely a whisper. The words stung with a truth they both couldn't avoid. Nathaniel dropped to one knee in front of Ellie, his eyes level with hers, seeing the echoes of his own face in her features. "Ellie," he began softly, his voice trembling, "do you know who I am?" The little girl's eyes flickered with fear and hope all at once. She glanced back at her mother, who stood frozen before turning back to him. "You're Nate," she said, almost questioningly. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. Her voice trembled as she stepped closer, but every step looked like it cost her a piece of her soul. "Ellie," she said gently, "this is your father." The words hung in the air like thunder. Ellie's eyes widened, her small hands clutching the edge of the table until her knuckles went white. A sob escaped Nathaniel's lips as he reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears falling freely now. "I should have been here. I should never have left you." Ellie's lip quivered and she whispered, "Mommy said you had to go." Her innocence cut deeper than any accusation. Nathaniel looked up at Rebecca, who was crying openly, tears streaking down her cheeks, her hands shaking. Rebecca finally stepped forward, her voice raw with pain. "You left us, Nate. You chose your dreams over me, over the family we could have had. And I tried. God, I tried to hate you. But I couldn't forget you. I see you in her every day." Her words fell like rain, each one a confession she had buried for years. Nathaniel shook his head, his voice low and desperate. "Rebecca, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I needed to build something before I could give you the life you deserved. And in the meantime," she shot back, her voice rising with years of pent-up rage, "we were here alone. She was here alone." Her voice broke, and she fell to her knees beside him, the two of them facing each other as the storm howled around the cafe. Nathaniel took her hands in his, gripping them tightly. "I can't change the past, but I can be here now. I want to be here now, for you, for her." His words tumbled out in a rush, each one a plea, each one heavier than the last. Rebecca looked into his eyes, searching for the man she once knew. In that raw, painful moment, they both saw the truth. The years had changed them, hardened them, but the love had never fully died. A flash of lightning illuminated the cafe, and for a moment the three of them were frozen in that fragile, heartbreaking tableau. Ellie crawled forward, pressing herself between them, her small arms wrapping around both their necks. "Please don't fight," she cried, her voice cracking. "I want you both here." It was a plea neither could ignore. They wrapped their arms around her, all three of them sobbing as the storm outside raged on the sound of rain and wind like a drumbeat to their reunion. In that moment, it was as if time itself paused, giving them space to feel every regret, every hope, every bit of love still left between them. A lesson settled over Nathaniel like a blanket. It's not enough to succeed or to love from afar. You have to show up to stand in the messy middle of your mistakes and choose to stay. He realized that his greatest failure wasn't leaving it, was believing he could ever replace the warmth of family with accolades and applause. As the storm began to die down, the cafe seemed to exhale with them. The air felt different, heavier with truth, but lighter with the possibility of healing. Rebecca's voice, hoarse but determined, broke the silence. "We have so much to talk about, Nate. So much you need to know." Nathaniel nodded his eyes, never leaving hers, ready to face everything he had run from all those years. The storm had begun to subside, but a steady drizzle still fell over Asheville's sleepy streets, glistening in the glow of the cafe's old neon sign. Inside, the silence, following Nathaniel and Rebecca's tearful confrontation, hung heavy. Ellie sat curled in Nathaniel's lap, her small hands fidgeting with the buttons on his coat, as if to convince herself he was real. The cafe felt like a fragile bubble of peace after the emotional hurricane they'd just weathered. But peace, it seemed, was not ready to stay. A sudden gust of wind blew the front door open with a loud bang, sending a spray of rain across the floor. Ellie jumped, startled, and in the confusion she slipped from Nathaniel's arms and bolted through the open door, her small figure disappearing into the gray night before either adult could react. "Ellie!" Rebecca screamed, her voice raw with panic, but her daughter was already gone, swallowed by the darkness. Nathaniel's heart stopped. He lunged to his feet, grabbed a flashlight from the counter, and dashed into the storm with Rebecca right behind him. The rain stung his face, the wind nearly knocking him off his feet as he yelled Ellie's name into the night. Every second felt like an eternity, every dark corner a threat. Rebecca's voice cracked with terror as she called for her daughter, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "Where could she have gone?" she cried. Nathaniel grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "We'll find her. We have to." They split up, each searching the winding alleys and empty streets that surrounded the cafe. Nathaniel's mind raced with worst-case scenarios, a stranger taking her the swollen creek, sweeping her away, or Ellie tripping and falling somewhere unseen. He cursed himself for not holding on tighter, for not realizing how overwhelmed she must have felt, with so many emotions crashing over her little heart. Rebecca's voice carried on the wind, hoarse and desperate. She ducked behind dumpsters, peered into parked cars, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Lightning flashed, revealing footprints in the mud leading toward the creek at the edge of town. Nathaniel's chest tightened as he followed the trail, the roar of rushing water growing louder with every step. When he reached the creek, his flashlight cut through the mist and illuminated a small figure standing precariously on the bank. Ellie was there, tears streaming down her face, clutching her stuffed bunny as if it were a lifeline. "Ellie!" he shouted, voice cracking. She turned to him, eyes wide with terror. In that split second, the ground beneath her gave way and she tumbled toward the raging water. Nathaniel didn't think. He charged forward, plunging into the freezing creek. The current threatened to sweep him off his feet, but he grabbed Ellie, pulling her close against his chest as icy water climbed to his waist. He fought his way back to shore, gasping for breath, his leg throbbing as he climbed onto the muddy bank. Rebecca burst through the trees seconds later, a strangled sob escaping her as she fell to her knees and gathered them both in her arms. All three of them cried, their tears mixing with the rain as they clung to each other beneath the storm-dark sky. Ellie's sobs were soft but heart-wrenching. "I thought you'd leave again?" she whimpered, her face buried in Nathaniel's soaked shirt. His heart shattered at the words. He pressed his lips to her damp hair, his voice low but fierce. "I'm not going anywhere, Ellie, I promise you. I'm here. I'm yours." Rebecca pulled back enough to look into his eyes, her own filled with a complicated swirl of fear-relief and something like hope. "You came for her," she whispered as if she couldn't believe it herself. He cupped her face forehead, resting against hers. "I will always come for her. And for you." The three of them staggered back toward the cafe, drenched and shivering, but bound tighter than they'd ever been. Inside, Rebecca wrapped Ellie in blankets, holding her close, while Nathaniel limped to the phone. He called Dr. Patel, the town physician, who arrived minutes later with a worried frown and a warm smile. After checking Ellie over, the doctor assured them she was fine, just cold and frightened. As Dr. Patel left, Rebecca collapsed into a chair, her body shaking with exhaustion. Nathaniel knelt beside her, his hand wrapping around hers. "Rebecca, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever make right. But tonight proved something to me. I can't leave. I can't live knowing I might never see you both again." A lesson settled over them like the quiet after the storm. True love isn't measured by the grand promises you make, but by the moments you show up when it matters most. They had both failed each other before, but this night showed them how powerful choosing to stay could be. As the rain slowed to a gentle patter on the roof, the cafe felt different, more like a sanctuary than a place of old regrets. Ellie stirred in Rebecca's arms, eyes fluttering open as she looked between her parents. "Can we stay together?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Nathaniel's answer was immediate and unwavering. "Yes, sweetheart. We can." The storm outside had finally passed, but inside the cafe something had shifted permanently. The three of them sat close, breathing together, knowing that, while the hardest conversations still lay ahead, the choice to face them had already been made. Morning sunlight spilled through the cafe's tall windows, turning the worn wooden floors gold as the world outside slowly dried from the night storm. The scent of cinnamon rolls baking in the oven mingled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The chaos of the previous evening felt like a distant nightmare as Nathaniel, Rebecca, and Ellie sat together at the small round table near the back hands, brushing hearts still raw but closer than ever. Nathaniel had hardly slept, but his mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. He knew what he needed to do. He looked at Rebecca, who was quietly brushing Ellie's hair, her fingers tender but her eyes cautious. He reached across the table and placed a folder down in front of her, the corners slightly damp from his still wet coat. Rebecca's brow furrowed as she picked it up. "What's this?" she asked softly. "It's the paperwork for joint custody," Nathaniel said, voice steady but low. "I don't want to be a visitor in Ellie's life. I want to share every piece of it with you." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears that slipped down her cheeks unchecked. She shook her head, voice trembling. "I don't know if I can just let you walk in and take half of what I built." Nathaniel reached for her hand, covering it with his own. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to give her everything I should have all along. And I want to earn your trust back, one day at a time." His words hung in the quiet cafe, settling into the spaces between the clinks of plates and the distant hum of the coffee machine. Ellie looked between them, her small voice breaking the silence. "Does this mean you're staying?" she asked, her eyes round and hopeful. Nathaniel swallowed hard, emotions thick in his throat. "It means I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart," he said. "You and your mom are my home now." That morning, the cafe doors opened and familiar faces from town began to trickle in. Mr. Franklin arrived first, leaning on his cane but wearing a wide grin. He paused when he saw Nathaniel standing behind the counter next to Rebecca, both of them laughing as they tried to remember the cafe's old cash register codes. "Looks like you finally found your way," Mr. Franklin said with a knowing nod, his eyes twinkling. Nathaniel chuckled softly. "Yeah," he replied, handing the old man his favorite blueberry scone. "I think I did." Together they tackled the morning rush. Nathaniel greeted customers with a warmth that surprised even him. Rebecca watched him with careful eyes, but couldn't stop the small genuine smiles that slipped through as she saw him tie Ellie's apron, teach her how to measure coffee grounds, or lift her onto the stool so she could reach the register. Each small moment was a quiet promise kept. A lesson settled over the cafe like a soft blanket. Love isn't just a feeling. It's an action repeated every single day. It's staying when it's easier to leave, showing up when you'd rather run, and holding on even when you're afraid. Nathaniel and Rebecca were learning that together, one awkward, beautiful, necessary step at a time. As autumn turned the trees outside, brilliant shades of orange and crimson, they made new memories, pumpkin muffins baked together on Sunday mornings, Nathaniel reading bedtime stories with silly voices that made Ellie giggle until she hiccuped, and quiet evenings on the porch, the two of them sipping tea while they talked about how to rebuild trust, piece by fragile piece. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, Nathaniel found Rebecca sitting alone at a table by the window, her hair pulled back in a messy braid, her eyes tired but softer than he'd seen them in years. He sat down across from her, their knees touching under the table. "I know it will take time," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness all at once. I just want the chance to show you who I've become." Rebecca's eyes shimmered in the fading light. She reached out fingers brushing his cheek. "And I want to believe you," she whispered, "because somewhere inside I never stopped hoping you'd come back." The next morning, the three of them decorated the cafe for the Harvest Festival, stringing up twinkling lights and hanging handmade paper leaves along the windows. Ellie danced around them, singing songs about pumpkins and apples, her laughter filling every corner of the space. Nathaniel and Rebecca moved like a team, their movements natural, comfortable, as if they had never been apart. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like living. The day of the festival arrived, and townspeople crowded into the cafe, drawn by the warm lights and the smell of fresh pies. Music drifted from a small band set up on the sidewalk. Nathaniel stood behind the counter, Ellie perched on his hip as he served customers. Rebecca watched them, a deep peace settling over her heart. Mr. Franklin, seeing her watching, leaned close and murmured, "Looks like your family's come home." Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes, but they were happy tears this time. Because in that moment, surrounded by friends and laughter, she finally believed it too. She stepped forward, slipping her hand into Nathaniel's, their fingers weaving together. Ellie reached for both of them, her little hands connecting them all. And as the sun set over Asheville, the three of them stood in the cafe's doorway, hearts restored, promises kept ready to face every tomorrow together. From a lonely millionaire who thought success would fill the emptiness inside him to a man who rediscovered his heart in a small, weathered cafe, Nathaniel's journey was one of painful truths, second chances, and the unshakable power of love. He ran from his past, chasing accolades and achievements, only to find that the life he thought he wanted was hollow, without the family he had once dreamed of. Rebecca's quiet strength, her unwavering commitment to their daughter, and the simple courage of showing up day after day, even when the world seemed indifferent, became the very anchor he needed. Together they faced storms, both literal and emotional, learning that real love doesn't just wait patiently, it fights, forgives, and heals. Through nights of confession, mornings of rebuilding trust, and countless small moments of connection, Nathaniel, Rebecca, and little Ellie found their way back to each other. They learned that while time lost can never truly be recovered, the future is always open to those who are willing to change, to show up, and to love unconditionally. The cafe that once stood as a symbol of Rebecca's survival alone became the heart of a restored family, a place where memories were no longer tinged with sorrow, but filled with laughter and new beginnings. Their story is a testament to how sometimes the road we fear the most, the one that leads us back to our deepest wounds, is also the path to our greatest joy. The moral lesson in this story is profound. Forgiveness is not forgetting or excusing what hurt us, but allowing ourselves and those we love the chance to grow beyond past mistakes. Patience and compassion are not signs of weakness. They are the quiet strengths that hold relationships together when everything else threatens to pull them apart. Applying this to our own lives means choosing to listen more deeply, to give grace even when our pride tells us not to, and to remember that people can change if we open the door for them to do so. Thank you so much for watching this story today. If it touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts or your own experiences with second chances, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and gives us the motivation to keep sharing stories that inspire and bring hope. See you in the next video.